Hello, how's everybody doing today? Yeah, let's hear it. Come on, let's hear it. All right. I can really get the party started with the, we're supposed to do the actual compliance thing, but okay, I guess we're skipping that. Fair enough, change of plans. There we go, antitrust policy. So RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace and will not be a forum for anti-competitive conduct. The RESO antitrust policy governs the activities of RESO and its members, including this meeting. Please consult RESO's counsel if you have any questions about the policy. So now we've got that completely out of the way. Oh, going the wrong way here. Oof. Oh.
Done.
Oh, so you got it?
Yeah.
All right, so 6 short months ago, we were here. Olga and I were up on stage, and it was a very interesting time. We had just kind of finished implementing some pretty chaotic things, right? We had the issues. We'd gone through the DOJ, we'd gone through commissions, we'd gone through dealing with all of this, and I'm just so happy that now, over the past 6 months, everything has been calm. There's been no policy changes, there's been no news, and so this time around, we're gonna be able to keep everything nice and simple, and pain points should go very easy for everybody. All right, in all seriousness, I'm Rick Herrera. I'm Vice President of Technology for Constellation Data Labs. I have been a member of RESO for about 17, 18 years, so I could relate very well to the pictures that Sam was showing earlier from the NAR building, us getting together, working through RETs, creating the data dictionary, and now we talk to 500 plus MLSs, we have all these new standards, we watched it all evolve, and I think we should all be very proud of the work that we've done, but we have more to go. So I represent the client side. Joining me on the stage, we have a whole ton of MLS experience.
Yes, so my name is Olga Ermolin. I am with MLSListings in Sunnyvale, California. Kids that were born the year when I joined MLSListings can legally order a drink this summer. So it's been a while. And I've been with RESO for a while. Rick and I, when Rick was with Realtor.com, going through all the fields and mapping all the fields. So a lot of work has been done, and we'll see. Gayle.
And I'm Gayle Ludemann. I am with MRED. I have been in the real estate services industry for, it's over 30 years now, and MLS for going on 25. I've been coming to these conferences here at RESO for 10 plus years, and it is a privilege to be up here and to help solve for some of these pain points that we have.
Oh, it goes backwards.
We already did that.
Yeah.
One more.
Okay, so the pain points that come up here, pretty much every issue impacts different stakeholders differently, right? A frustrating pain point that a vendor or data consumer might be experiencing could be just a necessity and necessary practice for an MLS due to compliance requirements or operational needs and things like that. So it's important to hear each side of this equation. And with that, before we dive in, we would like to see what is the room, who do we have in the room? So with a quick show of hand, if you are with AOR or an MLS, oh, nice. So I'm sure you guys share lots of pain points. If you are with a MLS vendor, okay. And if you are with a prop tech company, a technology company that builds tools for agents and brokers, awesome. And most importantly, our clients, the people that we're doing this for, are there any agents or brokers in the room? Nice. Okay, we have some. Woo. Awesome.
No, there's another one up here. There's a few.
There's one up here.
Okay, that's very telling, right?
So over the past couple of years, RESO has been doing these pain points sessions as a way for prompting the feedback loop and determining what do we work on next. So as we were preparing for this session, we thought it would be a good use of time to look back at what are some of the pain points that we've already either addressed or resolved with standards. So when I look at this list of pain points, there's one that's just kind of near and dear to my heart. I want to say it was probably about 7 years ago, something like that. And I was dealing a lot with data delivery, and we had many new data consumers who were entering the market who were not experienced in the real estate vertical, but they wanted data license so that way they could build their software and promote their technology, which is great. I love that. However, there was a big terminology hurdle that I kept encountering over and over again. My pain point was the use of the term IDX and how it so commonly is misused for any version of a MLS data feed, not just a specific IDX data feed. So RESO, thank you all for helping be a part of this. RESO created that RED course, which I highly recommend if you have not taken it or are new to the industry. It really helps you understand not just the terminology, but the roles of different organizations in the industry. Anyway, I don't want to go on too far, but that is one of the pain points that I was really impacted, and thank you, RESO, for solving that.
I totally can relate. We did maybe majority of our staff at MLSListings has taken this course as well, product managers, customer support agents, and it's been a huge help. A few other things on the list that we definitely benefited from is UPI implementation, as we operate several data shares, and duplicate listings is always a problem, duplicate history, and UPI just solves that problem and helps us to deduplicate data. Also public-private photo flag, it came up in the survey this morning, and it came up in previous pain points quite a few times, and there is a solution for that. So, Rick, what about you?
For me, the big one, the most recent ones, and was very near and dear to my heart as a technologist, was really working through trying to figure out standards for webhooks. We saw a presentation earlier about entity ID and some interesting ways that it's being used to kind of help validate the accuracy, the timeliness of a listing, whether something has changed or not. They were able to reduce the number of records they had to pull down, transact with, work with, in a simpler, cleaner model. So to me, I thought that was a really important one that we've done. And it's important for RESO to stay current with modern tech and to continue to evolve, because tech is always going to continually be evolving. You know, we bring up this slide very specifically to just demonstrate that the questions, the comments, the concerns that you guys have really do get attention. They really do make a difference. They do end up on roadmaps. We do work through them. They end up in work groups. And a lot of them we actually get solved, or they're in groups and they're actually being worked on right now. So your participation here really does make a direct contribution to the roadmap. Having said that, there's still some challenges. Just a little bit, as this is an interactive session, I wanted to put this up here and give people a chance to maybe take a little guess. That big blob you see in the middle, that actually came in as a value for one particular field in a data set recently. We had an error, transaction died, and so I copied it, I put it in here. Anybody want to take a guess of what field all this chunk of data came in? It's a junk drawer. No, it wasn't the junk drawer. List price. All right, that's a good guess. One more. Not quite. Property type. The correct answer was property type. And so if you want to learn JavaScript, or if you want to actually learn how to code property types, there you go. It's right there for you. We thought we would start today with just going ahead and addressing the elephant in the room. It's pain points. It's going to come up. So we figured we would just go ahead and start with it rather than just letting it come up.
Yeah.
So policy is policy, right? And that isn't any our thing. It's Council of MLSs. It's not necessarily for RESO. But how we implement, how we deal with things, RESO can absolutely help with. I'm a client. I work with 500 plus MLSs, organizations that are providing data. And so how this gets implemented is very near and dear, and quite frankly, a little scary to me. So just to kind of put some education, some information out there, right? So we know so far we have delayed marketing. It's a real thing. There's a timeline. We know that they are not Office exclusives. We know these are active listings. And in a fun little twist, we now have time constraints that are going to vary by MLS. And as a data consumer, we have to be cautious in how we deal with this, what we show. It'll come in VAL, it could come in back office, but listings are not in IDX. And so are there standards that we can create and ways that we can help do this? Again, I mentioned earlier when we had the concessions thing, I showed a slide 6 months ago with 80 different values we received that all had to get mapped within about 2 weeks and implemented for these MLSs, for all this data set. It's a big, heavy lift. And I'm hopeful we can come up with a way to do this a little bit better. We have some fields now, and I'm not sure this is quite going to help us, but
I'm sure every MLS right now is going through this policy and trying to map it to their current practice. Many of us have what looks like coming soon status, but it's not supposed to be a status. So people are trying to figure out what can we reuse, how do we implement it. It does seem like the fields that are present cannot really be reused because we have to send, if an agent or broker asks for their own delayed marketing listing only, we have to send it out. So that right there creates multiple custom feeds. So at least at MLSListings, we're looking at it, and we went away from coming soon. We used to have it. We stopped that, and our analogy to delayed marketing is active status, so check, satisfying that. And we have a flag, what we call members only. But that's now becoming a nightmare for you because now you're going to see coming soon, members only from us, and what you guys call private listings.
Right. So at MRED, we have private status listings. So we have private active, we have private contingent, et cetera. So we use that as a means of displaying those listings to all of our subscribers in the MLS system, but they're not available on like IDX and VOW at this time. So, so there's some things with that would match, and some things that might not match 100% right now, but still, that's another version that Rick is going to have to solve for. And it sounds to me like this is going to be a big pain.
so we wanted to put this slide up and start the conversation here. We saw a lot of hands go up when we asked how many MLSs are here. What are your thoughts? Have you guys put thoughts into this? Do you have initial ideas? How are you thinking about trying to do an implementation of this?
And we highly encourage you, go ahead and use the microphones so that way the people on our live stream can hear the questions and the answers as well.
You want to just raise your hands, Sam can grab a mic and run over and meet you. Otherwise, there are microphones up on the sides as well. We've got two options we've heard so far. All right. In the red.
Troy, is it Troy?
You can also get up and go to the mic stands if when it gets really lively in here and we've got a lot of people in line waiting, but we'll run them around for now.
Are you saying you don't want to be our Vanna White?
Just kidding.
So for us, we have a coming soon status that meets a lot of the requirements already. It's an active status, it can be shown, all the things that we have read so far. The decision-making part that we have to reach out to our brokers and gather information from them is, do we implement a time frame for how long our coming soon can be there? And if yes, what's the best time frame for our practitioners out there? And from there, do we change it automatically to active, or do we cancel it and tell them, hey, you need to upload it as an active listing now? The second part is we have DOM and CDOM. Do we need to figure out the recalculations of those based on what we're hearing from our brokers? So gathering information, other than that, everything is already set in place for us.
Nice.
Thank you. So we're not sure. I mean, we're probably leaning towards doing a, I'm short, so I'm going to do the lean here, to doing a status. This is my rock and roll question asking pose.
Just need the base now.
So we have a coming soon, but see, ours is different, right? Which is one of the challenges with coming soon, because ours is not really technically active and they can't show it and all that. So, but for those, so one of the challenges with this, I think, is how people are going to map their status. Is like with your coming soon status, do you map it to this? There's a coming soon standard status, right? Do you map yours to that, or do you map it to active? Active, right. So in my mind, like the delayed marketing, so our coming soon is mapped to coming soon, but my delayed marketing, I think, would be mapped to active. I mean, it's an active listing, right, for all intents and purposes. So, but I'm sure that, you know, it will be inconsistent across, unless we tell, I mean, I don't think we do that, right? But I think you're going to get some mapping it to coming soon and some mapping it to active, and it will be delayed. I'm fearful of that.
So just to add some clarification on the conversation with NAR, because we've been talking to NAR a lot about the intent on this, and to add to, you know, one of the slides you saw said not coming soon. That specifically means there are 1,001 flavors of coming soon across your MLSs. So there's no policy that allows everybody to know, will it be shown, will it go out in IDX, can they have an open house? So policy is sort of silent on coming soon. If you have a coming soon that meets all the requirements of the new DMEL, well, then you might just use that status. Most coming soons that we've seen so far don't meet all the requirements of the flexibility in the DMEL policy. So the key with statuses is you don't have to create a new status. You might. That might be a more complex solution than what's needed, but that's why we're talking about it now. But the interpretations so far have been that you're not required to make a new status if you can just add a flag, a field, a function that gives people this capability, then you would just continue as an active with this capability. But we're obviously still early in the process, so looking for more feedback.
Thanks, Sam. Will Burnham with Unlock MLS in Austin, Texas. So to the question that was on the slide, yes, we want to implement it. We were coincidentally working on, we don't have a coming soon status for context. We had it, took it away. It was a big, big data mess for us. So we were working on bringing something to our users that was just getting it in the MLS without needing every single data point an active listing currently needs. So we think there's a big time need in our marketplace. We have this vision crafted, and it's an active listing. In our mind, a yes/no flag for, we've been calling it delayed marketing yes/no. And I think just to RESO, standardization of that field, we would love to plug it into what makes sense within the industry, and, you know, having vendors, brokers, whoever know what they're getting and how it's used with us. And then that, like Sam was saying, the policy is kind of, it's a different beast right now, but we kind of think of it as a simple yes/no flag that brings conditional requirements to the data points that are needed, and it'll be an active listing with different rules around it.
So we're trying to gather thoughts, right? So I've been having a bunch of conversations, you know, dinner, okay, maybe the bar, various conversations around this, and so far I've heard a few different things, right? So coming soon seems to be one, and there are so many flavors, whether it's active, whether it's not active. I've heard people that are asking for a new status, kind of like you just mentioned, right? Display, marketing, yes, no. Some type of variation of an IDX, yes, no. And so I'm starting to hear a lot of different things, which is kind of what I expected to hear. I also think there's other interesting questions about date-wise. So how long will it be delayed for? Is it delayed for 7 days, 30 days, 100 days? And I want to try to get it right. I stand up here as a volunteer for RESO, and I do a lot of that, but sometimes I'm also still a data client, a data consumer. And so from that hat, I'm really looking forward to try to find a way to create some standard fields, some simplicity, so that we can all try to do this the same way, so that the various clients and consumers out here can very much follow process well and not make mistakes more than anything. We have a hand, we have a microphone over here.
Hi, Nicole Jensen, Real MLS in Northeast Florida. I'm only saying this, it's not my belief that this is a possible path, perhaps, so I'm just the messenger of a discussion that happened on the CMLS webinar when was that, Thursday? I don't know what city I'm in right now, quite frankly, but that at the very end, we had a really thoughtful hour-long conversation about this. We had no answers, it was just more of a discussion. But Art Carter went on mic and said, do we need to do anything? Was the question that was posed. And I just posed this in the room today to really, because in the beginning, I think that we all I'm just gonna speak for myself. I went immediately to, oh my God, another status. That was where my head went, right? Okay. Which then I started thinking, I'm like, maybe, okay, it's an active status, they say, so maybe a flag. But if it's all really dependent upon limitations that are going to surround the policy. Meaning, if you're going to limit the amount of time it can stay in that place, if you are going to limit how the events of perhaps price changes are displayed or not, if you're going to limit the days on market being counted, all of those things, then obviously you have to separate this type of marketing exempt listing in a way. But if you're not going to do any of those things, if you're not going to limit the amount of time it can spend, if you're not going to limit all of the things I just named, then we already have a field that says IDX, yes, no. And so I just am posing it to the room because I really was like, that blew my mind, and then we ended the call, and I just want to know what others think about Art's idea.
So I'd like to comment on that just a minute. So the RESO standard field that we have for IDX office participation, yes, no, that appears on the listing, but the decision of whether or not an office participates in IDX is made at the brokerage level. So this is a situation where if we use that field with that definition, then what we're doing is moving the decision about this topic from the agent and the seller's hands, how they want their listing marketed, up to the broker, who's not a part of that conversation. So that's why I think the IDX office participation yes/no field is not the right field. So maybe we need something different. I'm not sure.
My initial thought when I first heard this was kind of in line with what I just heard, right? It was just IDX yes, no, but really there's internet entire listing display yes, no, which is it's kind of more of a full opt-out, which means it isn't on the internet at all. With this, it can be on a broker's webpage. It can still be on an agent's own website. And so if we just use that flag, we now have two definitions and two different meanings for internet entire listing display yes, no, and that's a problem. So this is where I was kind of of the opinion that perhaps we need to create a new field, some new fields, and this is where I'm gathering some of this conversation right now can help us work through what we think might be a good set of fields, and really kind of narrow down.
Can I just clarify that
Yeah.
in my MLS, and this is where I obviously only have that that perspective, is we have a distribution tab right now on every single listing that facilitates the ability to opt a listing out of IDX on a basis that is in line with the rule. So that's what I was referring to.
And so the local interfaces and how you allow agents to do that, and if you have additional flexibility for opt-outs on a listing-by-listing basis is one thing. The IDX office participation was created to really opt out, as in you can't receive IDX anymore because that's based on a specific policy. As Rick said, an entire internet listing intended a full internet blackout for that listing, which is what someone opts out in that VOW policy. So that's why folks are asking, do we need a standardized version for this granular listing by listing opt-out of IDX and syndication, but allowing public marketing by the broker?
And we really want to have this conversation and hear from you guys, because from a RESO perspective, we can create the best standards in the world, but if you've already made up your mind on how you're going to implement, or you have your idea, then it's kind of for naught anyway.
Explain to me why internet entire listing display yes, no would not be a viable option here. What? Yeah, but if we knew it was a VOW feed, you're saying that that is also used for VOW to also opt out of VOW. I think, yeah, sorry. I think
We got a microphone coming over there. 1 second. We've got.
when we look at the implementation of the standards, which will just be as important as the policy, and if internet entire listing display yes, no is being the most widely used, maybe a new VOW one is then created for a VOW opt-out. Because I don't know how often the VOW one is being used currently today for the opt-out, but because internet entire listing display is popular, it is in a lot of systems, and we know this rule may be used more frequently than that one, use this one for that purpose, and then create a new one for the VOW, specifically for the VOW. And it was also mentioned they wouldn't get it on the individual office ones, but if you know it's your own office one, you're gonna have an office ID in the feed. You're gonna know that you're your listings, so you're gonna be able to display them if you want to and ignore that field. And I think from an implementation standpoint, people are already looking at that field, and it would be implemented on day one.
I think you end up with a field with multiple meanings. That to me is a concern. It's already used today with a different definition. That to me, then I'm not sure. And you won't be sure.
I also think, I'm not sure about repurposing an existing, I mean, if people are using internet, no, the right way, and now you're saying, let's just take the VOW out of that, and now people have implemented this the correct way, and you're changing what it means, and now they're gonna have to implement this other thing, but the question, I don't know what the numbers are, though. You may be right in that no one is using it the right way.
There is that too.
Catherine?
Oh, hi. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to share some of the prop tech experience. So I'm Catherine McIntosh with Listed. We're a vendor front end of choice real estate search app for agents and clients. And we deal with a number of MLSs across Canada. And the Canadian equivalent is the Realtor Cooperation Policy. And we don't yet, dare I say, have DMEL. But what we already do, so in our application, according to the Realtor Cooperation Policy, an agent that has a listing coming to market or fully exclusive, like never going to market, can put it in listed, and only they and people in their brokerage can see it, and any person they share it to in a direct one-to-one communication can also receive it. And so we are always constantly ingesting the rules. We never get, as a prop tech, a conversation with the MLSs to let us know precisely what they would and would not want us to do. We're always reading the policy online, a little bit behind whatever's been publicly posted, or trying to have this conversation about how can we be so fully compliant, because we agree that all listings should be in the MLS. So one of the challenges, we just had an agent call us, not even for a private listing or a exclusive or coming soon, but they said, why is my listing not on listed? Why is it not on these other services? And there are so many yes, no, opt in, opt out. So many agents have no idea what it even means. This person was saying, where's my listing? How come it's not on here? Like it's your fault. And he'd said, don't send it to the internet without realizing that wasn't going to send it to the internet. So it's quite a challenge. And then, so just when they are able to put up exclusive or coming soon listing, in the case of coming soon, it's literally an exclusive that has a 3-day public marketing period or a public marketing period according to the rules of that particular MLS, because of course every MLS can execute it differently with different days. So, and then depending if you're the listing agent or an agent in that brokerage, it can be a different view. And agents ask us, how come I can't send my own listing to my client? But to be hyper vigilant, we made it not even possible to share digitally so that someone couldn't accidentally let the listing out into the world. So for example, what we do right now is we'll get an agent put a listing in, and then all the saved searches of all the people who cannot see it, so nobody sees it, is not public, get sent back to that agent so they do know the other agents to be able to send a listing to. If it is a coming soon and it has a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day period, what happens is the agent puts the date it's going live in the MLS. The evening before it goes live on the MLS, it is removed completely from listed, and in listed it has a status gone to MLS. And then the next day, so it's never up at the same time, it's on the MLS. And we wanted to use RCP 10 to give this information back to the MLS and create all the data being at the source in the MLS. So I think we have all this opportunity, but it's incredibly expensive, confusing, and at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't know where all the listings are and can't make a decision, and realtors can't do a proper evaluation of what a comparative market
I thought
is worth.
the point of we have so many flags already that they're not sure which one to actually use, and there's fatigue from all the different flags was a really interesting point, and the training that's going to be necessary coming forward, I think, was also a super interesting point.
Yeah.
And Debbie, I know Debbie has the mic. She wanted to say something.
I was just going to agree with John Bro that I thought there was.
I knew I liked you.
Sorry. That I never understood there to be a situation where you could have an individual IDX yes or no option. But I could be wrong about that, I guess. But the other thing is that, kind of going to Catherine's point, like, we're going to do some meetings with our large brokers and our members to try to get their input, because I think, if we can do these opt-in or opt-out options, that's one thing, and that might be easiest for MLS. But I wonder what makes the most sense for the brokers and what's really going to speak to them so that they can, really fully understand what the option is for the delayed marketing exempt listing. And I kind of lean toward a status that would be easiest for them to understand.
Yeah, I agree 100% that we're going to have lots of communications and feedback from agents, brokers on this topic. But I think one of the things that Catherine said, I'm not sure where you went, but thank you. There you are. Anyway, one of the things that you said that I thought was really important is that in the conversation, the MLS isn't doing enough to communicate with the data consumers, not just about field changes, not just about metadata, but about what does this mean? What is the use case? What is the why behind the change? And how a data consumer can best ingest that new data. So I'll take that as an action item from this that
that's
we can
exactly
improve.
what we want to do. So we can keep discussing this, but as we know, in this room, the MLSs and the vendors are not sure how these things are being implemented, and we just put together a little bit of a spreadsheet. So we'll work with NAR and CMLS because we need to be able to explain this to our own companies, let alone agents who have difficulty understanding these things. So we'll work on that in the meantime.
We'll go Matt and then over here.
I just wanted to say that one of the complications is going to be that as MLSs have different number of days, different implementations, their data shares, and there's going to be conflict when they put listings into multiple MLSs and that share data with multiple MLSs. It's going to be heinously complex.
It's a very
You're right.
interesting point. If coming soon is used and they have different rules around it, how do you make a data share work? Please.
Hey. I'm Angie Baker. I'm with MyBor in Indianapolis. We have a status, it's called pre-market status, that follows most of the terms outlined in the delayed marketing. One of the things we don't have in place is a time requirement. We basically leave it up to the terms of the contract between the seller and their broker. And one of my concerns in the FAQ that went along with the, with the policy is when we start implementing these time restrictions, at what point are we getting in the way of the broker and their contract with their seller? So when we start making up those rules, we really need to think about these are real people in real situations, and there's not one size fits all. So, there may be situations where it's not going to be limited to 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. There are legitimate reasons why someone may be under contract but need to hang on a little while. So I would just say proceed with caution when you're making those decisions.
Thank you. Probably very good advice.
Hi, Chris Herrera with MRED. I'd agree with Angie on that one. We've had basically this delayed marketing exempt listing. We've called it private listing since 2015. And I definitely would caution on things like how long you keep something in a status or say how long it can stay in that status, because we've done a lot of research on this. We updated our white paper. It's on our website right now if you want to take a look at it. And the reasons for using these statuses are varied, very, very diverse. And to put any kind of constraint on it like that is going to cause you problems long term. So highly recommend taking a look at that. I also think you have to think about how this goes with the participant transfer feed and how that works with brokerage and how they get their listings back and how they can market it with that policy from NAR. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough in relation to how it fits with this policy and how it fits with our private listing policy too.
Question for the group, because so far I think we've only heard from MLSs who have, this is related, but coming soon statuses similar to delayed marketing with time frames, with limits on how long you can be in those statuses. We've heard a few negative experiences where MLSs have decided that wasn't useful for them and then they moved away. Does anyone have timing limits on being in certain statuses in their MLSs and had a positive experience with that?
Hold on. We have somebody over here. Let's do this, and then we'll switch over to Greg.
Yeah, I say at RMLS we have a limit of 3 weeks. I don't know if we can say how positive or negative it is. They do use the status.
Okay. Go ahead.
I work for MLS OK in Oklahoma. My name is Robert Outlaw. We have a coming soon status that is technically off market for 10 days and is a limit for the agents. And so far, we may every now and then get a complaint about it, but more often than not, people are happy to have that as an option, even though there is a limit by the MLS enforced by our compliance team.
I'm Megan McFarlane with the New Mexico MLS. We have a 14-day limit on a temporary off-market. The broker can always make that active at any time, and with a little wine and chocolate, I can extend it for them. We don't have them extend it because then it would be a perennial temporary off-market. Absolutely no questions. We have a waiver form that the seller signs. It's almost this to a T.
Somebody delete the last 30 seconds from the live stream. There's no exceptions in that rule.
All right,
Can we hear from more of our data consumers?
We definitely have some vendors in here. I don't know if you guys have put thought into it.
And you did submit 30 questions today, so we've got some other topics.
Sure.
My name's Chris. I'm with ICE, formerly with EXP and Showcase and Rocket, and I've been on a lot of sides of this thing, and there's a lot of great ideas that are floating around on how to implement this thing. Where I'm at now, and I think Rick, you would agree, great ideas don't always scale. So we got to make sure whatever we do, we can scale it out at a national level. Everybody can have kind of unique implementations, and that's fine, but a lot of unique implementations in our world will look like what you saw earlier on the slide from Rick. A lot of if statements and a lot of guessing, and we have to make a lot of assumptions that we think we know what you want and how to implement it. And so it can get tricky and things can get pretty out of hand pretty quick if there's a bunch of unique implementations on basically the same policy. So it feels to me like this is a great CMLS issue to kind of bring up too. I'm outside of that world now, but I think it's good that we're talking about it here too, but I think, a lot of thought should be put into it.
Yeah, I mean, from a policy perspective, yes. From a, how do we get this information transmitted out to all the right people? I think it very much falls in RESO's court or in our wheelhouse to try to figure out if there's a common way to do this. Should I go back there first? Is that what I'm hearing?
So I have
Then Bill, go ahead. No, go ahead.
just a question to the audience and get a perspective that sellers have to sign a disclosure where everything has been explained to them, their options. As far as that disclosure, how are you anticipating, are you going to collect them or do they upload it upon listing entry under that specific status or category that you correct? Will you create a check mark that they have that in their possession? So I'm just asking the question to my peers to get an idea.
All right. Bill?
So again, going with this data consistency, we don't want to implement it as a data consumer 3 different ways.
3? I would be happy with 3.
Okay, maybe 6 or 7 different ways. I mean, we saw this with attribution where RESO did a great job, Sam. They published one out, but still a lot of it, people didn't see it. They implemented it their own way, and then we're still to this day, we have these weird edge cases on how we handle attribution rules. Coming soon, same thing. Coming soon's in a lot of IDX feeds. It's not, you might not be for your MLS, you're not publishing on IDX, but there's a lot of them that do have that in there. So that's not a catch-all either. So again, if we can be consistent, whether it's everyone agrees it's a status, which I don't think a lot of people are fans of, but or if it's an extra field, as long as we all do it the same way is what I would like to see as a consumer.
Yeah, we've come together, we've talked a lot about RESO standards all day long, some of the advantages, some of the ways that RESO standards have helped foster innovation, empower technology, empower people to build things faster. We've heard all these great presentations today, and here's a great opportunity where we have something new, and we can try to find a way to do something that's easy to transport, that's common, that everybody can do, and that we can follow along in a consistent manner. And there's a lot of value. I found it interesting. I've just been taking some notes, and we've seen things like pre-market status, private listings. These are not in RESO. So there are still a lot of things out there that are not quite RESO friendly, and somebody gets to decide what to do with that. When those things should be shown, when they shouldn't, all that kind of stuff. So my only ask in all this is really just to find common ways to do this. It really helps everybody out there. We heard earlier today, help your brokers, your agents be able to get technology from people faster, easier, empower those companies. They're helping your members. That'd be my plea for today, to try to find a way to help us to do this. We are taking all this feedback. This has all been really good feedback, and hopefully we can come up with something, as an organization.
I'll just answer, I'll just answer Roya's question. With the Office exclusives, we have them upload a private document, and so that helps with compliance. We will do the same thing with this disclosure. We'll have them upload it with the listing as a private document so that our compliance team can keep track of those. We will have to audit them to make sure it is the actual document, just like somebody said earlier, that it's not just a blank page or some. random thing. So that's how we anticipate, handling that. And then you mentioned our pre-market status. We never intended for it to leave our BLC, so we didn't, we knew it was going to be a local flavor. We never anticipated having to put it in any feeds, so that was one of the curveballs with this policy. So we intended for it to just be a local thing, so. Surprise, surprise.
Sergio?
I'd just like to recommend that we don't make it a status, because that's going to inflict a lot of pain on a lot of MLSs, because they have rules that have status transitions, and they have business rules that deal with statuses. Is this going to be one of their active statuses or not? Days on market. So I think it's much easier if we absolutely don't make it a new status and go with a couple of fields. It seems like the more logical and easy solution.
And work with internet yes, no fatigue.
And that's part of pain points too, is figuring out what's our job to do and what's our job to deliver these kinds of questions about forms and disclosures and deliver that conversation to CMLS as well and get that kind of feedback. So any further feedback on DMail before we dive into the rest of the questions we've got for pain points?
Okay. I'm perfectly okay with that too. I thank everybody that participated. It was a very lively conversation. So people that came up to the mic and were able to talk about, what their vision is or what they're talking about. Again, we greatly appreciate it. It does help contribute to the standards. Thank you very much for all of that. I sincerely mean that. Thank you. Okay. Then with that, the floor is open for anything else you want to talk about. We have a whole list of questions that actually have come in through the QR code. So I want to thank everybody that has submitted stuff. I can certainly start with one, and we'll see where it goes from there. One that's been near and dear to my heart recently has been around under and overuse of modification timestamp is what somebody wrote. I will say for me, I have a particular vendor now that is changing a modification timestamp, updating it, but then the record's not available in the API. So then we miss it. Later on, it becomes available in the API, but the window's already passed, and so it's out. I heard a very interesting thing today. Janine came up and talked about using entity event. And I'm curious if others have had this type of thought process around it, being able to track the order of a listing and whether or not I should pull something based upon the last entity event that I received. I think it's a really interesting solution to think. Are there other thoughts or anybody else have these types of challenges? Should I name the vendor that's doing it? I'm just kidding. I don't do that.
I know modification timestamp has been a real pain for me lately. In terms of like our regular standard process, a listing is edited and the fields change and then modification timestamp is hit. Boom, 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 done. Got that. What we're finding is it's the unusual processes that maybe it's not getting hit in the right order. So perhaps it's doing an agent transfer from, a listing is transferring from one agent to another, and that's why it's going through an atypical process. And maybe that timestamp gets hit, but it comes back to the situation you were talking about. It might not get hit in the right order. So these are technological challenges that we have to deal with. And we just got to solve them one at a time. I don't know what else we can do with it.
Well, I know we'll certainly talk to the people while we're here, but I saw a hand go up right over there. Gayle?
There could be, while people are coming up, there could be some maybe best practices, suggestions that RESO can put together for handling downloads and avoiding modification timestamp pains. I know we definitely have situations where data changes, but modification timestamp does not. Or child record comes in before parent record, all sorts of things like that. And maybe or when downstream a data consumer actually misses updates because they don't account for an overlap. Or if we operate a data share and this data moves from different systems before it becomes available. So there are many specific cases behind modification timestamp, and what maybe RESO can help with is best practices, things like that.
Thank you. She kind of hit it on the parent-child situation. Sometimes the vendor's process for photos hits one point, and they see the photo modification timestamp, but the actual listing hasn't been brought in because their cycle didn't hit that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Catherine here. So Olga, Rick, and what was just shared, I just want to reiterate, we're having the same experience where a timestamp is not actually passed down in the API. We actually don't get it. Most recently, this has been a big challenge with open houses. Agents wondering why their open house isn't accurate, isn't there, isn't showing.
So how do we test it? How do we find a way to prove it, to correct it, to eliminate? We all agree it's a problem.
Okay, so that's a really, let's get to a solution. So my CTO and I were talking about this, and we were saying, actually, the thing is, if somebody doesn't call us and say there's a problem and we don't check in the records, we can't even be taking a screenshot to go back to the MLS and say, oh, this is what the experience was for us, because we don't know what we don't know if we're not made aware of it, unless we were just sitting and constantly watching it.
Or you create a bunch of sync processes that actually mask it so you don't really find out anyway, which is still a problem. It's not a real solution.
Yeah.
All right, which way do we go here? I wasn't sure.
I'll let them go first.
All right.
One of the things that we're seeing is that, yes, there's a modification timestamp, but it's unclear whether that means the source system's modification timestamp or the API's modification timestamp. Some systems give us a modification timestamp, an originating system modification timestamp, so we need to tail off of the modification timestamp.
And
Other
vendor
systems
X
give us
modification timestamp too.
an API modification timestamp, and modification timestamp is the source system. So we need to tail off the API modification timestamp. And that also causes confusion and try to get the right ones.
And missing data.
This might be one of those best practices scenarios as far as we've added all these fields, and for good reason, and they do provide value, but it's been quite a few years, and does everybody know, and as new people implement, do they know how they're supposed to use them? Because obviously it's a thing that should not happen, but it happens pretty regularly.
I was echoing exactly that problem. Again, each vendor a lot of times has their own field for that modification, so same issue.
John?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what's been said here. Some of this stuff is sort of things you find under the rug, and it's things that you would have hoped would have been dealt with years ago because it's such a basic part of running an API. With the one vendor where we were experiencing the problem, sometimes the modification timestamps were backdated by 40 minutes, and it was happening across the board for many of the MLSs. And so I thought I would, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I reached out to a lot of the other MLS vendors and was asking around what we should expect. And I got mixed feedback, but I will call out Trestle for advising that the gap between the setting of the modification timestamp and when it's in their API is only a matter of seconds, which is really what it should be, ideally, not 40 minutes on rare occasions, to be fair, but nonetheless, because our customers then tell us we're missing data, which is not really our fault. We have sync processes, but they're not running constantly, of course. And so it's the other problem. I kind of saved a list of greatest hits, but related to modification timestamp, there's also a case we ran into where they were future dated, tens of thousands of listings across many MLSs coming through a particular vendor, RETS and Web API. This was going on for hours and hours until going into a weekend, before we noticed that our queues were filled with millions of listing updates because our 5-minute incremental jobs were getting the same tens of thousands of listings every time because of these future dated modification timestamps, which was not a tripwire we had ever thought to put in. So, but again, I guess the theme here is that these are sort of basic things you would hope that would have been resolved by now. So.
Perhaps best practices and guides and things we can create that might help provide some instruction could be an option.
So kind of along the same lines, I'm sure you've seen it, Rick. You pull your 5-minute incremental and all of a sudden you've got 10 million, 20 million records because there's been a mass update and somebody forgot to throttle it. And then 5 minutes later, you run your incremental again, but you backdate it 30 seconds because you're smart. And now you're pulling in 2 to 5 million of the exact same records. Yeah. Oh, again, unnecessarily.
That was part of the recommendation we received, was just pull for a larger timestamp, but there are consequences to that. It's a lot of extra data and extra transactions.
So any of these issues too, you may not have the answer for it. You don't know exactly why it's a problem. Maybe these technical folks obviously do. We're finishing the Red T course out, so this is the kind of thing that will become best practices and training materials if you share those with us. So that's why we want to hear these things, even if they're not solved yet, to make sure these become training materials for folks who are building these systems and hopefully can, things like originating and source systems and the IDs and related data elements, that they can implement those correctly.
I was going through the list of questions, and again, this is great. This is like RESO roadmap for the next couple of years right here. One of the questions came up that I assume from an MLS that they still receive requests from agents to remove photos after the listing closes, right? Because the buyer does not want photos out there. This came up a few times before. I think I talked about it last pain point session. Data Dictionary added a permission flag to media resource. Media resource is what feeds your images out to downstream. And by just using this flag, an agent can set images to private. This is what we've done at MLSListings. We implemented it a couple of years ago. I know some of our data share, San Francisco has done it too, and Bay East. And it solves the problem. When they change status from active to sold or from pending to sold, they have an option of hiding photos. There is still a little issue with downstream. We still have some of our data consumers, some of our vendors that still need to implement and respect the flag, but major downstream, major portals have done it. Realtor.com has done it. Zillow and Homes and a few others. So again, for whoever posted this question, there is a solution. Work with your vendor, have them implement. And I believe most MLS vendors have implemented this flag as well.
Want to talk about client certification?
Oh yes, so I think, where is our word cloud? It was so pretty. Let's put it up.
Yeah.
There you go.
They cannot see it.
I have it here.
Okay.
It's the last slide in the deck.
They're gonna put. Well, anyway, that kind of brings me to another question, possibly for RESO, is have we considered to certify clients not on transport, right? Not on if they're able to pull from API and from REDs, but on actually being able to respect this business rules. So as an MLS, if I have a vendor that comes to us and asks for data feed, I kind of would like some kind of assurance that our basic business rules will be respected. And that could be, and believe it or not, we're still coming across issues where address format is not respected. If agent says, I do not want full address to be spelled out on internet, on a public facing website, it is not always implemented by a vendor, and that means our compliance team has to go and audit those sites. But that's not the problem. The problem is that seller wish is not respected. So address, sometimes even internet yes, no flag, we still see vendors struggling with it, and of course the public-private flag for images, we do see that some downstream vendors are not respecting it. So could be a client certification where we could maybe have an endorsement for a tech company that is building tools for agents that they are capable of respecting things like that.
So is that from a vendor perspective, a third party, like a Constellation? Like Constellation Data Labs, or is it for like websites like a Realtor.com to say, are people honoring the flags that are sent?
Yeah, it could be for a portal like Realtor.com. It could be for any vendor that powers IDX sites or public sites. I mean, majority of these issues are for consumer-facing, for public-facing websites.
Oh, hey, Rick.
Sounds like an interesting product.
Well, I was just going to say that is so great what Olga's suggesting because, for example, we take so seriously if the address, we make it not mappable. So a lot of agents will call and say, like, how come I can't find this property on the map? And it's because it's not supposed to be mappable. So we just have a alert that says unmappable or not to be mapped. And we also don't show the address. But then we get feedback from people saying, how come it's on all these other sites? But it's not on this, right? It's not on my product. I don't know because we're compliant.
So you're criticized for doing
Because
the right
you're
thing.
good.
Yeah, so that's a challenge. So this would be good if we could solve that.
Josh?
Yeah, I can speak to this one a little bit. So there are two parts to this. There's the transport side. We definitely want clients to do the right thing there, but that's more mechanical and technical. And then there's kind of the business side of how do people work with the data. RESO is working on a RED course right now. It has some of that stuff in there. We definitely are looking for people to make suggestions about the kind of things they'd like to see. And we want to look kind of more at the industry level rather than one market, what their business rules are. So if you're interested in helping to work on RED you can email dev@reso.org.
Do you want to mention it just a little bit more, put some insight into what that is?
So RED is a technical course. You've heard about the RED B that we have right now. So far, it's about 40 pages of grueling details about how to deal with dates and timestamps, statuses, all that other stuff, how to pull and do audits during replication. We could definitely put stuff in there about about addresses as well. So we're really looking for those kind of things that Olga said, to get a list of those together so we can add those to the course.
So my challenge is, it's easy to say, yes, address should not be displayed, but we're really talking about display compliance. And it goes beyond that, such as disclaimers, logos, and the problem is every MLS has different rules. And so it's very hard as a data consumer we have to hire people who constantly paying attention to it. MLSs change rules, don't even tell us that they've changed them. And sometimes it's really silly things that they have in there. It's just for them that we have to make exceptions for. So I think it's going to be kind of hard to really, truly, unless you do some very base concepts, and then it doesn't really mean much.
I don't know that we want to technically solve, but I assume you have a database of what all these rules are, like well, the rest of us do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's a layer there you could test, and that includes testing me. But I feel like there's at least some layer that's doable, and then it gets harder as you go, and it gets more.
But even
obscure.
then, it's like your font size. If somebody, this font size has to be this size every Sunday. Things like that. Well, nothing like that crazy, but they do have some crazy stuff where the MLS actually just copies and pastes it into a Word document, and of course it changes, and then they call and complain to you that it's not the same font size and things. So even some of the MLSs don't know how to even test it.
I'm not exactly sure. I think technically there probably are ways to start with some basic set of rules and find ways to start scanning, testing.
Yeah, some of
It's
these are
interesting.
in the
It'd
data
be-
dictionary.
It would create a lot more compliance, which is what everybody wants. Everybody wants. All right. Anybody want to bring up their own topics? Questions? All right, we need a mic over here.
Hey, my name's Tom Cunningham. I have a CMA SaaS called CMA Snap. And currently, when an agent inputs a listing, they can click both pool on property and community pool. And pools are a big part of our algorithm in searching for and selecting comps. And so it seems like it'd be an easy fix to just make it private pool on property versus pool on property.
I have struggled with that. I think you are right. But I would also be open to ideas. If other people have solved this, I have seen such things as well.
I asked him to do that so we can have it on video so we can bring it up in Data Dictionary.
Yeah, one item related to that that you'll want to be aware of is there is a duplication subgroup for Data Dictionary that's just being formed now, because we have a lot of those kinds of things, pool features, exterior features, where there may be multiple ways to represent similar or the same things. So that group's going to dig through the dictionary, find duplications, see what the best way to do those things are, potential deprecations, potential best practices. But if you've got information to share with that group, Gayle is our fearless leader of that subgroup. So we'd love to continue making that more streamlined and improve the dictionary that way.
There you go, Gayle. Free advertisement.
Yep.
The first meeting is Thursday, April 24th. So.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. Other topics? Gayle, you want to grab one off the sheet?
So I'm just going to read this comment. It says, despite RESO's efforts to standardize real estate data, many IDX feeds still contain custom or non-standard fields. This creates unnecessary complexity during integration, forces vendors to maintain custom logic per feed, and leads to inconsistent experiences for agents and consumers. It slows down innovation, drives up implementation costs, and undermines the benefits of standardization. And to that, I would say yes, and MLSs need to meet the needs of their local agents and brokers. And if there isn't something in the RESO standard, it's my firm belief that we do our focus groups, that we understand our customer, that we meet the needs of our customer, and then we take that new field or that new enumeration and we bring it to a RESO Data Dictionary meeting. And we try and see if anyone else is implementing something like that, so that way we can expand the Data Dictionary to meet the needs of the consumer.
I also feel like there are groups, there's Bill, there's us, there's lots of companies out there that
100%
have this. In fact, RESO, as a matter of fact, and some of the work that Josh has done, has collected all this stuff as well. I'm curious if we've ever done a deep analysis on looking at the private fields and trying to figure out how much of this is really saying the same thing a different way. Whether it is a certain, then there'd be two categories there. One within the dictionary, so really it should just be a standard field. Or B, that is truly outside of the dictionary, and maybe it never got submitted to RESO, but there's enough out there now that maybe somebody should do that analysis, break it up, and then sum it up, and then bring it to RESO as an option.
So I didn't write that one because it was way more elegant than I would have said it. But I think a lot of the issue is that, I mean, there's custom fields, there are local fields. There are a lot of MLSs that we deal with where they don't even make the attempt to move them into the standard field. And there are times where I have to argue with the MLS and the vendor. And sometimes, thank God Josh is here. He was one of my pain points that he's never here, so thank you, Josh, for being here. But a lot of times I have to reach out to Josh saying, hey, am I misinterpreting this? Should this be in here? And then I have to go back to them and say, I spoke to the big boy over here, and this is what he was telling me. Can we please implement it? And then they're like, yeah, maybe in 5 months. And that's like, it gets very, I need it fixed now because you forced me to move over to this web API, so.
I agree that sometimes the time frames that it takes for an MLS to implement change, even necessary and important change, can be longer than it should be, especially in this technological day and age, but it's a pain point, so we got to try and fix it one thing at a time. Catherine.
Hey, Catherine McIntosh with Listed. I want to take an opportunity in the solving of things to basically bring up the idea of adoption. So for example, for so many years we're working on the UPI, and Anthony Percaccio from MPAC in Canada went just out of his way to get RESO certified to make this possible for consumers in the end in Canada to be able to have deduplicated data in whatever feed they're getting from their realtors through whatever website they have. And so we've taken all these strides to put these standards in place. And if the MLSs don't adopt it or it's not in use, how do we move forward? So from a solutions standpoint, it would be amazing if the MLS said to us, hey, vendor, what's one thing we could do that would make our lives and the lives of all our members easier, better, smoother, that would cause us no work, but you could do and give to us? Like that kind of open conversation would produce innovation and less effort.
So if I asked you that question, what would the answer be? I have two MLSs up here. One of you ask her the question.
Okay. Sorry.
So what is your answer to that question? So if MLS did ask you, what is the one thing we could do for you?
Okay.
What's the answer? What would you want them to do?
Okay. When we have a standard come down and a field like UPI, give us this field in the data structure so that we can actually remove any duplicated properties. Or if we're dealing with an MLS that you don't deal with, we can use the UPI so that we can aggregate the sale history on listings within that same MLS, or take listings that are maybe in two different MLSs and aggregate those because we actually know it's the same property but two different listings.
I think UPI is amazing. It solves exactly what you're saying. Deduping records, deduping history, and also tying history together when properties are sold in different MLSs. But Catherine, I don't think it's an issue that MLSs can solve. It's for MLS vendor and technology provider, CoreLogic, ICE, Rapatoni, because it's not a field that agent will enter, right? It's a derived field from all the rest of the data in the listing or in the property. And I think it is something that vendors, and I believe some of the vendors have implemented. I think CoreLogic has. I don't want to, I might be wrong. But that is something that MLS vendors should do. It's not something MLSs can solve.
Hey, Rick, yeah, just a quick one, not to change the topic too drastically here, but I'm Brock Pace. I work with Data Master. We're in the appraisal software side. So we work with RESO, we work with MISMO. Are there ways that we can collaborate more with those two entities to get more interoperability, more synchronization on the overlap from those two standards? What can we do there?
So you're talking about a translation or reference to correlate the fields that are in the dictionary to some of the MISMO dictionaries, and then
correct.
On the assessor side, you guys also have a standard too, right?
Yeah. So there's ANSI standard, there's MISMO, which is more mortgage, and then there's the appraisal side, which is part of MISMO, right? So there's all those, and we're all talking about property data here. How do we come together to not have to have, when we define a property, right, not have 5 different ways to define that property?
So the UPI would be a great thing to push as far as being able to identify the property. I think that's the solution that RESO has out there. Have we talked to MISMO, Sam? Have we talked to MISMO about using UPI? Is that something that's come up?
Not specifically on UPI. We talk to MISMO on an infrequent basis, and where we have overlap, we'll have a conversation about that. But there are a lot of systems built in place and processes and inertia and what both organizations are doing. I think it's probably easier and easier today to have some sort of translation layers between companies using both systems. It's worth saying the question earlier about all the local fields in MLS systems. Part of the certification process now includes analyzing all the local fields across systems, hundreds of thousands of fields across local MLS systems, and seeing, do these look like standard items, and using logic to try to find those, to suggest those mappings during certification. There's a fast track group that goes through additional review on some of these things. So it's a big project. Maybe it's not as big of a project today if RESO has our sort of Rosetta Stone for how we see all these fields across the industry, data dictionary and some of these local mappings that we see for local custom fields. And maybe we could work with more of those organizations now. We just haven't had someone step up before and say, we want to do the lift. We want to go document and translate between all these things.
I'll sit down. Yeah, I mean, part of it, you know.
We either have to have people who are voluntold to do these kinds of things or stand up and volunteer themselves by asking the question. So another work group chair is in the making here.
And appraisal, mortgage, these are all such important parts of the industry. They tie so closely together with the listing. I could see where that could make a lot of sense. So you just got voluntold right there, if you weren't looking back right now. You just got volunteered. Okay, over here, back here somewhere.
I'd like to go back to the other question of what MLS vendors can do to help.
Okay.
Well, there's that modification timestamp problem. So I would urge all the MLS vendors to implement event types and implement it correctly and make it available, because honestly, that's the best way to fix all of our replication issues that we have.
So we had 2 questions in this list about certification and the certification process. So for those on the technical side who are looking to certify your systems, go to transport.reso.org. That's where you see the specs. But there's also information about our certification utilities where you can do self-testing and get the process started. Obviously, you're going to be emailing Josh at dev@reso.org for questions you have outside that process. Someone asked for a visual of what that process looks like. We could probably work on something like that. We have a very basic one now, but if that's something people think would make it more simple to understand how to get started and make it through the certification process, that's something we'll take back to work on.
Hi. I'm the boots on the ground. I'm a qualifying broker, realtor, owner of a brokerage, and I'm in Carlsbad, New Mexico, where we have a housing shortage. I'm attempting to recruit home builders from far away to come to me, and they are requesting absorption rate. Does anybody know what absorption rate is? How many months does it take to sell out your market? And I'm having to do math. And I'm a realtor, so, not my thing. It's just an equation of how many houses at a certain price point, or maybe condition, a brand new house. So is there a way, I know this is way off topic, but is there a way to get data or an equation field or something that we could work with that would show us the absorption rate of the houses on the market? Because y'all are data and that's math.
It's not
So
off
I'm
topic,
thinking
Rick.
y'all-
I think you're going to get about 5 invitations from vendors as you walk out that door.
That's what
to
I
have a
was thinking.
conversation.
I'm like, I could introduce you
Bring
to a
me
whole
an
bunch
app.
of people. I think, so after this, a little bit later today, there is Constellation Data Labs is hosting a happy hour. You're going to have that question answered several times over now because you asked the question. So thank you for asking. All right. Hit it.
One of our pain points is around removals from the feed. So there's several different ways that vendors are doing removals. There's a field in the listing. There's just reconcile every so often and watch if you don't see it for a while. Is there a queue resource now maybe? I don't know much about that one. Should there be a standard way to handle removals?
Yeah, probably. I think that's a very valid point. There are different ways of doing this for sure. Obviously, there was the old way with RETs, and that was basically what we call the sync process. Web API, if you are actually getting to follow the entire workflow, it works. There is a status in the dictionary called delete. I don't think Rob is here today, but Rob and I have argued about this in the past. I continue to lose. I suspect I probably still will, but the delete status really is delete the listing out of your system as opposed to it should just no longer be visible to consumers. And I feel like that's one of those fields that gets used multiple ways. It doesn't have a consistent definition, and it creates a lot of that problem. I think it's a very legit problem that we could take a look at and work at. I've felt that pain too. I really have.
Well, and to kind of piggyback on that, I don't think Q totally solves that either. It kind of does for a legit listing delete, but there's also the instance where I can still see it because I've got a val feed, but you lose it because you're IDX. And so it's not deleted, but for you it's gone. So, dealing with the visibility and, handling that through Q and having to put in everybody's permissions and generate Q, I don't think that's a great option, so.
The addition of an off-market status is something I've brought up before, so it's just not active anymore. It's off-market. Haven't won the argument yet, but doesn't mean I won't quit trying. In fact, you know that I won't. It's still something we need to solve for sure. It is a problem, and the problem is that delete gets used multiple ways. That's the root, for me, that's the root of it.
Would this fall under best practices that RESO can define with various pros and cons of different approaches?
To me,
I
it
think
sounds
a little bit
like
of the horses left the stable already, but potentially.
This was actually one of the topics that went into entity events. Part of the design of it is that even if you can't see the record, you're going to see the entity event. So if something gets removed from your feed, regardless of whether it's a delete, transition, whatever, you're going to see an entity event. But when you actually go to get the proper record, it's going to disappear for you. So whether it was because it transitioned off market, whether because it was actually deleted from the system, it doesn't matter. You're still going to see the entity event. So there's none of this having to go back and reconcile, having to have custom queues for different feeds, et cetera. That journal of entries is always going to be consistent for every member or for every feed of that system. So this addresses the issue that Brian's having. This addresses the case you're brought up, and this is why Sergio with certification is saying the best way to address this and the timestamp issue, if you're a replicating feed, is to use the entity event system because it addresses so many of these pain points that we've seen and why it was introduced.
So
did we add a message to that as well? Didn't we talked about putting a message in there so that you didn't just not get nothing back, but there would be a message, right?
We
kind of remember having the discussion. I don't remember where it left off.
We had, I believe there was 3, we had talked about putting in creation, update, deletion kind of thing into that field to pass it, but I don't believe that actually made the spec because of the fact that the behavior will be different based on your feed type, and trying to generate the journal for each individual feed, especially with the complexity of some of the rules and the DML stuff we're talking about now, it's going to make it very different for every feed, and it just becomes extremely difficult to keep it consistent. And one of the reasons we have so many different problems with modification timestamp is because people have done it so many ways. The goal of the journal was to keep, entity events was to keep it simple so that there's a lot less chance to screw it up.
So it seems like entity event should have been on the bingo card. Go ahead.
Cool. So to switch topics for a second, but to circle back a little bit to local data. I'm a huge fan of local data. My favorite field right now that I've found is number of garage door remotes. And I think if it's important enough to be in the MLS and it's not standardized, we absolutely need to support that. Where we run into problems, and I think, like watching the broker public portal presentation and hearing back here about the private pool versus public pool, the natural language for HOA or has a pool, that only works if the data at the MLS is maybe not the RESO standard field, but can be cleanly and easily mapped into this is a public pool, this is or a private pool, this is a community pool, the HOA exists, et cetera. But when we get data like townhouse/condo, we're stuck. We can't do that because those are two different things, but without any additional data or supporting data there, there's nothing we can do, to get that into a clean standard. And so I think I used to be a firm believer of native adoption at the MLS level of the dictionary, and I've kind of come off that a little bit, but I think having an MLS data set that can be easily translated into RESO, especially as we're adding new things and we keep that in mind, I think that'll help a lot going forward, and it will facilitate a lot of the innovation that we see. And the AI might not be hallucinating, it just might be bad data at the source. And so, kind of protect against that, being very cognizant of how we handle our fields.
And I will add a little bit to that because you talked about condo/townhouse, which is tricky. A lot of this goes back to a lot of legacy systems to To all the MLSs and to the vendor systems out there that have done the effort to map your old data, your historical data, and taken the time to break it and actually turn it into RESO compliant, dictionary compliant data, I cannot thank you enough. I'd rather you do it than we try to do it. You're gonna do a much better job of it. You're gonna be more accurate with it. And it's just, if you guys have done that work, and I'm sure it was a lot of work, I cannot thank you enough. It's greatly appreciated.
Morning, that's Dale Sickema with Membio. First, I'd like to say you said didn't not get nothing back, and that was a beautiful use of a triple negative. Thank you for that. But back to the deleted issue, it's not just listings, it's all kinds of records that we have this issue with. Open houses, member records, office records. And I like the idea of whoever's talking about the entity events, if that was well available through vendors, that would be beautiful. Something I've seen was MLS Grid does is they have a field for everything that says if it's available. And if it's no longer available, the record's still there and it's not available and you know to delete it. And so I would encourage everybody to start using some sort of soft delete and not simply disappear the data.
Right, yeah. Concept of soft delete versus hard delete, right? Hey, Josh.
Everybody back here.
Welcome.
So on entity event, we left that very minimal because like Jeff was saying, it could be very different depending on your feed and your view. But we actually have some subscriptions and filtering coming with statuses inside of that. We'll talk about it in transport on Thursday. And that could tell you something like if the listing went off market without giving you any more details. So that might be something people are interested in.
Okay, I'll tell you what, one last call. Anything else people want to talk about? Any other topics? Anything that's important to you? Well, we're going to go from last call to happy hour here in just a minute. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you guys so much for all your participation. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very